get started. And our conversation this session is about community. And, I think every conversation, I think, begins with a definition of terms. So I'd like to hear you guys' definition of what you call community in a broader sense or in the sense of like how you experience it.
Well, I was thinking ahead, expecting your question, and I'm not real proud to say that I think my concept usually is pretty close to me. The place where I am, the people who are in this same area. But I do have a broader sense of the world community too. But for the things I do, it's more limited, I think, to people that I have actual contact with, or see out my window, or whatever.
Yeah. Kevin, what would you think?
Well, my sense of community really has been changing quite a bit. Initially I think it was just people around here, around the local area, was my sense of community. But then, starting in the '80s, early '80s, I started going out, traveling around more, and I got to be, have like a wider perspective on community. And so, of course, there's family, but then there's also, there's all these connections that go beyond family. So, yeah, it's really something. And then I have this, nowadays, well, up until recently, most of my livelihood was based around the local area, mostly going to schools. And so I've, developed a really great sense of community just around the region of South Dakota, North Dakota, and in this area too. And, but then, of course, my wife lives down in Florida. So then I try and stay connected with her, but down there, it's, I never really, aside from a couple of people, I was never able to figure out the sense of community down there. So I kind of gave up on trying that, but I'm happy with the sense of community over here. And then, of course, I have this other, as a Baha'i, I've got that sense of community, which is really a global community. And then also I've got this other sense of community, of course, from the indigenous perspective, that group there, that's kind of a interesting community. And then I've got this other sense of community too, which is also based on language. So, like I can interact with the English speaking community, which is pretty broad, but then I've got this real shrinking other community as one of the few fluent Dakota speakers left too. So that's another, so there's a lot of different perspectives on community, but I just thought I'd mention those few.
It's nice.
So what do you think is the underlying thing that makes all those groups community?
Oh, well, with me, yeah, it's just it's the connections that we have. It's the connections we have. So it's like a shared sense of vision, shared sense of destiny. And so to me that, the real sense of community, it transcends all these other things, like race or gender or language or whatever. So to me, the true sense of community is something that overarches all of that. And it's more like a spiritual connectivity.
So a spiritual connectivity.
Yeah. That's
Higher vision.
what I really feel, yeah. Just like Lawrence, even though we're quite a long ways apart, and we don't see each other that much, but yet I feel like he's really such a tight, I feel a tight connectivity, a real sense of community and support.
And I think that's likewise, it's interesting you bring that because the kind of things that over time that we've done together, things that we participated together,
Mhm.
that creates for me a sense that it's those historical things, like I was just looking at some photos not so long ago, and there was one of, and I came across one of your mother and your sister and I were in this
Yeah,
together out on where when your mother was like across the place from you, across the
yeah,
road, and going back to to those times and the kind of conversations we had with her and then like when well just various things we've done and tried uh,
yeah,
over time. So I also feel that kind of a historic, when people share time together, uh,
yeah,
what are we if we're not history?
yeah. That's right.
You take that away, and then we weren't even here.
Yeah,
Mm.
So when
Yeah.
we share that time together, then it just kind of makes community. Even if you're fighting, you become a kind of a community.
yeah. Traveling street fight. Yeah,
Exactly.
Well, and that's where the stories are so important that I am becoming more and more aware of the people who have history and history that goes back through generations, but they keep them coming, enriching all of us in the community.
Mm, mm, mm. I think we dropped Allison somehow.
like I'll give an example here in this little community. This is called Wakapala here, and so these people here in Wakapala have like genealogical ties that go with each other, go back like what 30, 40,000 years.
Mhm.
But yet that sense of community is just changing so much, so that those ancient ties, blood ties, they're not holding the community together at all. It's
Yeah.
not,
Yeah.
Mm.
there's not that sense of unity or solidarity here at all.
Oh yeah.
Even in my short lifespan, it's just changed so dramatically here.
Mhm.
So do you think that people somehow do you think that people don't feel that sense of connection or what?
Well, yeah, it's that, but it's has everything to do with just the forces of disintegration, family disintegration and social disintegration, and I'd say it's a feeling of dislocation,
Uh,
not just social but like spiritual
Mhm.
dislocation.
mm,
So people are just lacking a sense of destiny and hope and sense of unity and prayer.
mm,
So yeah,
mm.
but I don't take a negative. It sounds negative, but I think we've got nowhere to go but up now.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Alex?
Kevin, do you think that the European invasion and the attempts to annihilate the indigenous was the most cataclysmic thing for the people in all those thousands of years? I don't know the history beyond, like the 18, 1700s. I know some of that, but
Yeah, yeah. Well, historically, the U.S. government was really out uh, in its policy of extermination. So, it was very strategic and very thorough plan. But in the case of the out here in the Dakotas, it wasn't it wasn't completed. So there's still lots of Native people out here. But in this area, like here all the way out to Aberdeen, these are all what do you call them? They're Russian German. They're actually German ethnicity. Like even though
right.
not even out there towards Aberdeen is pretty out that way quite a ways too. And so
Germans
then
from Russia, yeah.
yeah, Russian. They came from Ukraine, but they're ethnically they're German.
Mhm.
But anyway, they're going through the same things, of course. Now they didn't participate in the genocide, but when these lands were all, when the native people were removed from these lands, then they opened up those, east right over, I can see right here, for homesteading, and so they didn't have a hand in the genocide, and they're going through the same processes too over there, with the uh, young people, mass exodus of young people, and like these little communities over here, you can just see them, like like Mound City, and then there's Eureka right over here, and Oven, and all these little towns. Their median age is really high. They're closing down all the schools and everything, so they're suffering from the same forces of disintegration as well. Yeah. So we're all caught in it. We can't point the finger at anybody and blame anybody. We're just all in it together.
Allison, how would you define community?
Just a common bond, you know. Um, you know, and I mean, if there's, I mean, on the highest level, I think there's a spiritual connection, where you can feel something that can transcend language or whatever, but there's still strong communities, and maybe that always reaches some, I mean, people with the same illness can be a community that's very strong and powerful, and maybe it doesn't have maybe once you get a tight community, it always has a transcendence and stuff, but there's all sorts of community. Something I think that takes you away from isolation, like just a connection.
That's an interesting point.
And I think I was telling Lawrence that I heard a podcast on loneliness and community. That's, we talk about epidemics in this viral sense, but loneliness which is a lack of community, is at epidemic proportions too. And what happens when people go into intense loneliness, it can turn to anger, and it can turn into all these other things. A lot of people that are, when you think of school shootings or something like that, comes from feeling unconnected, that nobody loves them, and then feeling a resentment towards it, that everybody else gets this love except for them, and it can turn into this other thing. So I think it's community is the opposite of isolation, so some people can be solitary and not get that because maybe they have communion with the earth around them, or they have a deep communion internally with a spiritual being or connection, and so it's not really about individualism or that kind of isolation. It's just a disconnection from anything greater than themselves. And community can do that. Community of a body of people, even a body, people find community in that too, maybe in their disassociation. You can find a community of people that are just feel disassociated, and there are people that prey on that too. When you think of internet indoctrinating people into certain causes, you can find community in that dislocation too,
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to take it just from your comments here that all of you feel that community is important. So we can kind of skip what was going to be my next question was, is it important? If you disagree with me on that, please feel free to say so. But assuming that you do feel it's important, can you talk about why it's important? Well, what does it bring to us? Why do humans need community?
Anybody?
Don't speak up all at once.
Well, I can jump in, but I don't like to dominate a conversation.
There's only 4 of us, Allison.
Well, we're social beings, you know. We need each other. I feel like there's been an illusion that we don't need other people. You know, right now, I think that's an epidemic crisis as well. The selfishness that we feel like that we can exist on our own. And if there's any good that could probably come out of this pandemic is to see how we're interconnected. Now, I don't have, you know, that we need, and that, you know, we need the backup. You know, people have distrust of their government for good reason, but also government can help regulate things and can help us. I mean, I think you know, if all the bailout money doesn't go to big corporations, but actually goes to small businesses or to helping those that have to go on unemployment by getting actually a living wage for the next few months, that helps everybody, probably more than these big bailouts that are already doing fine, you know. But, you know, we're all interconnected. Roads don't happen without, you know, other sport, you know, just, we're not all self-sufficient, especially in this day and age. We all rely on others, whether they're invisible or not, you know. So yes, community is important. It'd be really hard for any one of us in this day and age to live on their own without any other resources, to go into the wilderness. And if you can survive in the wilderness, that's because you have a deep community with the natural world around you. And I doubt there are very few people that have deep enough community with the world around them to survive. There's very few that can.
You know, what I've noticed too is that even those people who go out into the wilderness supposedly by themselves, they usually take stuff with them that's made by other people. And
yeah, they're still wearing clothes. Yeah.
And then a lot of them actually come back in from time to time, you know, to get their supplies and then go back out. So it's not like they're completely, you know, isolated. So, and the other part of that too is that you'll notice that if you ever find those people, they're usually not wrapped up all that tight, you know. So, you know, it's like I saw some of the evidence of that when I was living in Alaska, and there are a lot of people who go there to like live in the wilderness and be away from each other. And one of the things I became aware of pretty early was a lot of them were people with psychiatric issues, and they were there so they didn't have to take their meds. And you could tell when you met them that they needed those meds. You know? Because a lot of them, you know, like they were struggling just, you know, just to make sense of how the world works, you know. And I grant that a lot of times the medications that they were on substituted problems. In other words, they had a problem, they take the meds, and then they got a new problem that they didn't feel comfortable with. But I say all of that to say that people going out into the wilderness by themselves, you know, that could work, you know, under some special conditions, but it's not mentally healthy. I remember when I went to this place called Wadi Natron. It's a Orthodox, or actually it's a monastery out in the middle of the Egyptian desert, and they're a Coptic monastery. And I was talking to the monks, and they were talking about how the reason that monastery existed was because there were people who wanted, it was really originally a place for hermits. And of course, hermits, they do live all by themselves, but they were saying like, the equivalent of their pope asked them, sent an emissary and asked them to start this monastery because there were a lot of people who were going out into the desert but having no idea of what they were up against. They were getting not only lost because they were unprepared, but mentally they were like cracking up from being alone. And they talked about how it's important to prepare one's mind for long periods of being alone because the mind has a hard time to adjust to that. And they said, people, sometimes they see God and sometimes they see things that they think is God, but it's not. so
it takes a lot of discipline to, yeah.
You just walk out there and be by yourself. So that's,
yeah, and to be in tune with, with the natural elements and what you need. I have no doubt that a true deep spirituality, and which is a deep discipline, it requires a lot of observation of how nature works and how in your own mind and how to perceive, to be at one with the world, and I do believe it's possible, but I think there's very few, the very high attainment to be able to get there. And maybe that's what the monasteries are trying to prepare people for. So, I mean, and that's a different kind of communion. So I don't think there's ever an absence of communion. Communion is not necessary. Communion has to be, I mean, for those that can survive out in the wilderness as a solitary human, you still have to have communion on a broader sense.
Well, one of the interesting things about that too is that in monasteries, they are a very strong community. It's all about community in the monastery. It's the hermits that are, and even the hermits actually have community. They just have an understanding that everybody stays in what they refer to as their cell. So they'll dig a cave or something and be up in that mountains, or off in their particular space. But they, whoever is the head of that hermitage, they go around and check on people too. So it's not like they are completely disconnected from each other. They spend long periods of time alone, but they actually still stay connected. So even though they're hermits, that's a relative term, But I'd like to, unless someone else has, something to add on why community is important, we could go on to the next.
I'll just quickly say, I think for myself, it's a more close personal, maybe self-indulgent need that I have. I feel I want to give of what I have, whether it's my spirit or my joy or my sense of humor or my warmth or whatever, to other people because I need it myself. So that's just a different level of what I'm thinking, I guess.
Kevin, did you have anything to add?
On the importance of community, that's the topic, right?
Why it's important? Yeah.
Why is it important? Yeah. Well, that's the spirit of the age now. Is that we have to. It's like we can see all of creation is interconnected, interwoven. That's what we can really, really observe now in the spring. Now you see everything is unfolding sequentially, so that it's the same every year. So you see everything unfolding sequentially, and it's the forces of life being unleashed. So that's it just shows how everything is interconnected. But now, see, as human beings, we just have to. It's our destiny now to bring ourselves into alignment with these forces of integration. That's our big, huge test right now. Is how are we going to do it? And it's just like to me, the way I look at things like this virus is that it's forcing us now to reconsider our patterns so that we have to, we're going to, eventually we're going to have come to a place where we'll have no choice but to see how we can cooperate and interact. So it's really such a fascinating time now where, you know, our free will is being kind of like stripped away.
It is. It's something very beautiful about it. I mean, there's a lot of tragedy in it, you know,
Yeah.
and especially, you know, it's easy to speak about the beauty of it when is also speaking from a position of privilege, you know, that I'm not immediately worried about not having enough to eat or being kicked out of my house or, you know, losing a job permanently, you know, all those things, you know, so there are bigger issues. So I realized, but there is something beautiful to feel like, you know, man has dominated so much and is polluting the earth and stuff that nature still has the upper hand that
Yeah.
can, you know, can put our thumb down and say, yes. And it's almost a benevolent thing. This, as horrible as the virus is, there's something beautiful and benevolent about it, because to put a stop on things over the entire world, you know, and to let nature creep in a little bit, you know, in places that it hasn't been able to go into, or the air to clear a little bit, and for us to all to see how, you know, we're not a nation of that just stops at its borders, you know, that we are all connected in the whole world, you know, in every little thing. And just like Kevin was saying, yeah, there's, you know, some will see it and some won't. And some will see a way to exploit it. And some others will see a way to draw benefit from it, you know, to push ideals, you know, and that's the hope, is to reinforce, you know, the positive things about it, for people to see like what is really necessary, you know, what is this. But I thought there was some, listening to our, for those that don't know, I live in California, I'm in San Francisco, but I was listening to our Mayor Newsom this morning, you know, just talking about the different things that they're doing, because they jumped in early about sheltering at home and all this stuff and trying to figure out. And one of the newest things is they've really identified people being isolated, you know, and elderly people being shut in, and how dangerous that is. And that United, who I hate, but somehow they're working out a thing with employees of United who are customer servant agents that aren't working right now. They're partnering with them to have a care line, so that they're using them to be a place where people can call in or to reach out to people, to connect by phone, which I think is, even just the thought of that as a possibility is a beautiful idea that I hope can spread goodwill. Not only, but now they have a phone number that you can call if you just need to air a view or air something, you know, or whether you really just need contact with people, which is, I think, a beautiful outcome. Another thing is they're removing, you know, shelters are a big place because there's too many people in close things, you know, that they're working with Hotel Sixes or here in California, to get the elderly moved into hotel rooms to actually, but this might grow into a program that actually is funded, you know, where it gives housing, because there's been housing shortages. So, you know, opportunities where these things wouldn't have been possible before in a crisis, hopefully can be a plan too, but also just recognizing isolation.
I'd like to switch a little bit to talk a bit about how we build community. We've talked about that it's important, and we talked a little bit about why it's important. But how do we do it? How do we build community? Whether we start from where we are, or if we can imagine people who don't have community, how do they build it? How do you build it? How do you maintain it? Betty, you got any ideas?
Yes, we have a nice community of artists in Aberdeen, which came together 2.5 years ago and has taken on a life of its own. And it's a great inspiration and a source of a feeling of belonging. Artists oftentimes around here seem to feel like they are the outcasts or the unnoticed or the weird, all of which may be true. But by coming together once a month, and it's a very fluid kind of thing, we have a set date, time, potluck. Now we're meeting via Zoom, but people show up. Sometimes we have 8 or 10 or 12. Sometimes we have 20. We all bring an idea or an object to show and tell. Everybody gets a chance to share, and we eat together. And people are open to asking questions. We have poetry, we have paintings, we have fabric artists, we have people that make the weirdest things with found objects. So that is a really, and it surprises me that the city of Aberdeen, the people who live here, who don't consider themselves artists, suddenly realize we are all here because we've done a few things to let ourselves out of the closet, so to speak. And that's really a valuable addition to the larger community. And we have members who come from 50 miles away.
So was that Lawrence? Was that your doing?
Well, Betty organized this.
Okay.
Lawrence plants seeds, and I thank God for one time I was fertile when I got a seed planted on me. Sent out some emails and such to people that I thought might consider themselves artists and invited them to come for soup and bread one night at my house. And they did, and they still
Just
do.
by starting with what's around you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which takes a little bit of courage too, because everybody's worried about rejection or something. So that's a courageous act to actually reach out to people.
Yeah, well, for me, it wasn't courage required. It was just organization for a moment. But for many people who do come, it is a big step of courage for them to come feeling vulnerable that they're actually going to talk about what their creativity is and show it. And it's a very safe place. That's the one thing that has really been obvious to me. People come in not expecting, and they're just wondering if they can survive the ordeal of coming in, and then they don't want to ever miss it.
Feeling free of judgment is an important component.
Right.
Establishing a freedom from judgment or something.
Yeah, it's really been a good thing. I'm grateful for it.
Anybody else have ideas about how does one go about building community?
I sense that both Kevin and Lawrence take their community with them wherever they go, because
Yeah.
each of them comprises a community.
For me, it's just my multiple personalities. That's what. Yeah.
And we both have that same issue.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
One of my personalities have their own community.
Yeah.
You have a community of personalities.
Yeah.
They don't
You
get
take
along,
medication?
they don't get along well together, but they get along well with other people.
Diversifying your community, I guess.
Yeah.
Each one's always trying to dominate the other one. So.
Mhm.
Yeah, there's different degrees. Just I think looking for what's needed around you I mean, looking at the people around you, you know,
Yeah.
because it's,
Well, recently I've been quite interested in this idea about creating communities and what goes into them. And I have, some opportunities with the stuff I do in the prison to to create communities. So I have about 6 groups, and in each one of those groups, they are kind of like a self-contained community. That's the way I kind of design it. So uh, and also it's a self-sustaining, and then I try to empower all of those people to feel like they are equal eye level members of their community. And it's interesting how for a lot of people it's the first time they really have thought about how you build community, and many of them feel like they are alone, especially, even though they're in the close quarters in their cells, have a roommate, a cellmate. But one of the things they talk about is even with their cellmates, how disconnected they often feel with that person in the cell. And then when they do have a bond with that person, they don't want to leave or change cellmates. And that's often some of the issues they have with administration when they try to change their cells and change their cellmates. And it's one of the emotional things for those guys. And sometimes they go off and end up getting in solitary because when they go off, they're so bad about it. But it's interesting the experiences I've had both in the prison and outside of the prison with encouraging people to build community around whatever they think is important. Find the people that you love, and if you can find somebody, then just the practice of doing that, I find that's useful.
Mhm.
Kevin, you've been part of lots of different kinds of communities, and especially being Baha'i, you know, I'm I'm going to guess that you've seen and maybe even encouraged some of those uh, uh, clusters of people to create congregations around Baha'i. What are the kind of elements that go into people making the connection and somehow feeling bonded enough to create some kind of ongoing connections?
Yeah, that's one of the big movements in the Baha'i world is to really build up a sense of community. Especially the main underlying thing is to create skills for service, for community service. And so this is what you see all over, is that people are doing, especially like children's classes, and then I think even beyond that is this focusing on junior youth, animating or getting the junior youth. And junior youth is that age from about 10 to 15, where young people are transitioning from childhood into like adulthood. And the whole idea is to harness that energy, harness that that dynamism, so that these junior youth, like I say, 10 to 15, can create like a momentum, some real positive spiritual momentum. And there again, the underlying thing would be service. So they could be of service, maybe to do children's activities, or to do maybe do activities within the communities, and so on and so forth. So this is a big movement all over the world. We're trying to get this going over here, but it is kind of a little, it's a little bit difficult but it's moving. And so the underlying premise behind all that is like our spiritual foundation. So we have to work on that first, and that's what's going on quite a bit now. I'm participating in, like, even like today, right here, right now. This is all part of it is, how do we build these understanding, shared vision. And then, so then, like just about every day, I'm also participating in devotional gatherings where people just bring prayers and share prayers. They don't have to be any particular denomination or anything like that, but just people are doing a devotional gathering. So it's all good. It's all part of the building that infrastructure. Yeah. And one more thing I'll mention, this is also like, I think it was last night, I participated in this gathering of indigenous people, and they're from all up and down the hemisphere, and it was all about praying, and that's the underlying theme is that everything has to have a spiritual foundation, and that's what the Dakota people, the underlying premise is that we have to reflect on how our actions, our prayers have the basis to reflect on how our actions affect not just the current situation, but how our actions affect the future generations as well. So this is an underlying premise. And then another big theme built into Dakota culture is a child-centeredness. How how we can create a foundation or a nest for our children and youth. So these are no matter how dysfunctional that Native person is, that Dakota person is, this is one thing they'll always recognize is that these underlying principles of creating a spiritual foundation that's based on the interrelatedness of all, especially the children.
In various times, there have been people who come from different places in the world to connect with other Baha'i. So there you have like an international kind of connection, and
Yeah,
it goes beyond just coming together and, let's say, having some kind of religious ceremony. There's
yeah,
other kind of deeper connection. What are the
yeah.
what are the kind of things that you do to foster and even train people to to appreciate and actually participate in that kind of interconnectedness? And and these people come from all different kinds of walks of life. What
Yeah.
are the kind of things that you do to get them to feel comfortable enough to just sort of, let's say, show up on the Reds and stay at your house for a week, even though they
Yeah,
or more, and even though they never knew you before? What are the
yeah.
that happen like that makes that possible?
Well, it's just like this underlying belief that that basically we're all one. It's just we're all part of one human family. We're all created by the same one creator, and we're all put on this planet, to serve one underlying cause, which is to uplift and advance humankind for everybody's well-being. Yeah. Yeah. So that's the underlying foundation. It's just this belief in the oneness, and that the goal, of course, is to create unity. So we can't hardly argue that we're all one. Some people might, but the main thing the main hurdle we have to get to now is to create unity, And so we can pray and pray, but we can pray until the paint comes off the walls, but we have to actually back that prayer with action. So the action where that rubber hits the road is in service to our communities. Yeah. Whereas now people are saying the best service we can do now is just to stay at home, but there's a lot of things we can still do beyond that, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. I think we sell ourselves short if we don't try to be creative.
Yeah.
Given the hurdles that we have, how do we use that? Especially if we we think further than what is my problem today, but what will we what will we be like after this is over? I think earlier in the conversation we were hinting at, and I think Allison made some points about how, look, this can be a good thing if we start to see, well, what can we take out of it? What can we learn? How can we be different people? What are some of the things that this experience forces us to recognize, the value of each other, the value of the person you walk past many times on the street, not knowing or even caring what their name is, but then that person is the person who does some little function that without that function being done, all of those great and grandiose things just kind of fall apart, because that's that one little linchpin that needs to be done. And other people don't even know that that thing is being done, let alone its importance.
Yeah,
I'm
exactly.
noticing a lot of people are taking to the internet to teach basic skills that aren't so basic anymore, from bread baking to drying vegetables to planting a garden,
Mm.
sewing. Look at all the masks that have been sewn by people who maybe haven't sewn in years.
Yeah,
And some purpose to be of service when you feel
yeah,
so helpless.
yeah,
Yeah, just uh, limitations can be really stimulating. Like
Mhm.
how, like I don't buy this like your freedom's taken away because you have to
Mhm.
shelter at home. Yes, that's a lack of creativity.
Yeah.
Because that's not where your freedom is. Um, and not only that, it's just plain selfish to think
Mhm.
that your individual freedom is bigger than the rest of the health of the nation or the world.
Yeah.
But
I want,
yeah, just the creativity of what can you do from home, and maybe even learning how to rid yourself of all the distractions that are keeping you blind to community, is important. Maybe you don't need to be on the internet looking up tutorials. Maybe you need to weed yourself up off of looking at tutorials and actually doing things, or to not being told or getting off, so you're not weighing like what you should be doing, but just going inward and thinking, what do I need to be doing? Like those can be important things too. And then even on a government level, just like thinking, creative solutions is important. Just like Kevin was saying, like when they say the most important thing you can do, I think that's one important thing we can do is staying at home is a generous act. But from home, there's a lot of things that you can be doing, and that's where, and everybody there, I don't think there isn't a person, if they exercise their creativity a little bit, usually feels good. If you're making a mask and haven't sewn for a long time and hand it to a neighbor, that's going to feel good.
Mhm.
Checking in on a neighbor feels good, and if people just getting a little taste for that, maybe wanting to build upon it, or so I think it's good just to even emphasize the positive things too.
Mhm.
one of the barriers I kind of recognize to people making community is lack of interpersonal skills. Like sometimes people want to say something, but they don't know how to say it. And then sometimes they're afraid to say it, or they don't, because they don't know how to say it, they don't say it until they get so mad that it comes out as emotional vomit, you know? And
That's the thing, that's the danger of loneliness, is you start turning it on yourself, like what's wrong with me, and then it turns into a frustration, which turns into anger and all those other things. But yeah.
so where I was going with that really was, how do we, how do we improve interpersonal skills ourselves? And then how do we help other people to improve their interpersonal skills?
Well, Lawrence, you probably know that more than
Yeah,
most of us, you know, but I mean, I guess maybe this,
they argue about it.
yeah. So I don't know, listening, just being listening to and and showing, you know, just hearing people can be a boost to help bring somebody out, and I think that's a hard thing to do. I mean,
Well, I would say that there are a number of ways, and there are a number of needs, because there are a number of ways that people feel uh, they lack, or they do lack, different kind of skills. And some of it is verbal, some of it is just not knowing the, let's say, the appropriate act to do, or how to do it. And I think almost everything comes down to practice. You know, it's like we can have an intellectual thought about, and we can even have a very interesting academic discussion about which words are to be used, which ones are appropriate, and which ones are not. But then it comes down to the doing, and then that becomes kind of interesting. Like, okay, well, how do you know, where does a person get practice talking to people without fear that if they get it wrong, that they will, you know, get the electric shock, you know? And that's really important, to encourage people to be able to practice. So my practice is getting people to do kind of what we're doing now. It's like, okay, let me create a forum, even just between myself and a casual stranger or kid, you know. Let me be the forum where you practice saying whatever is on your mind. And I just ask you, and then I keep asking you in different ways, so that it gives you an opportunity to think about something, and think about how you feel in a way that you feel it's okay to be valid. Of where you're at right now is a good place for you to be. If you want to go someplace after that, then you go to that place after that, because you discover that, oh, that might be an interesting place. And maybe it's not as scary as I thought to go there. I can try that. Making opportunities, connecting people, introducing people to other people, you know. I had the hardest time, and it took me way too long to realize that, whereas I could just go up and start talking to someone, other people found that really hard to do, you know. And so then at some point figured, okay, well, one of the things I could do is introduce those people to each other who would never talk to each other otherwise. They would walk past each other 100 times on the street, but I could be that conduit. So I think in terms of helping people to uh, improve their interpersonal skills, and at the same time that creates the basis for them to be able to find a different, you know, make community. uh, I think that's a valuable thing that we can do, and we can do that either, you know, electronically, or even there's the post office so far is still working. We can actually still write letters, and that's something that people don't get, you know, is letters. So if you send a letter to someone, that's, you know, something that's not a bill, that will get paid. Somebody will pay attention to that. Even if they won't pay the bill, they'll pay attention to that letter.
yeah, that's been a fun thing about here sheltering at home. There's a lot of little ideas, but also I get so busy, you know, that you don't enact things. And that was one, was setting up a letter writing station.
Oh,
And then, so just regular, one, I want to start the USPS because I love it. I love stamps. I love the whole thing. And then, you know, and I'm in things, I'm like, okay, who am I going to write? You know, and then things are coming out of the woodwork, like a letter from somebody I met 8 years ago. And I've also received 2 emails from people out of the blue from the
I think
past,
people are
you know,
doing
which is great. And so, you know, I'm hoping, you know, letter writing's hard too. I don't know if you, because you don't have any spell check and you're like, oh God, I just spelled that, but I can't start over. It's got to just go with it. You know, I can mark out that letter. You know, it's like a thing you forget about. And I just have to hope maybe just receiving the letter with handwriting is going to supersede
it will.
the imperfect sentence.
It becomes a work of art and a work of love.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
All those bees too to get their feathers. That's the hard part.
Yeah. I've started calling people. I haven't been much for calling or receiving calls since we've all gone to texting, but there's some people whose voices I want to hear, and then I find that they want to hear mine too. So it's nice to reach across the continent a little bit.
It is. And I've been trying to call relatives that I know that politically we think differently.
Mhm.
You know, so I'm always kind of dread or scared to call them because I don't want a conversation that I don't want, you know, but being surprised in these conversations, you know, that in that places where there are no orders to, you know, or recommendations to shelter at home, that people are taking it seriously, and then learning about what they're missing, you know, and trying to really, it's good because I'm surprised, you know, that I feel like, you know, maybe there is more hope. Maybe not everybody's blindly, I don't know.
Well, and if
I
anyone
think people are I need to give people more credit, you know, and not make assumptions, because I don't, you know, because that's what I'm always critical of people making assumptions about things, you know. So it's a good opportunity to also give people the opportunity to not make assumptions about me too.
Right.
You know, it's a two-way street, you know, and I feel like that's an important act in itself, is, you know, to break down stereotypes and give other people the opportunity to break down their own stereotypes as well. You know, that there's subtle things that you're transferring, you know, even if it's just like how to negotiate, you know, where are our commonalities, so that the conversation grows out of the common things that we hold important, and it can escalate to like a bigger political idea instead of attacking a political idea, you know, and saying this is how it should be. Actually make it an organic process that people can deduce for themselves, you know. And so, and then that's practice too, just like Lawrence is saying, you know, practice. But also I think there's practice just on the street. You know, I love strangers. Strangers are the best interactions, you know, because you're not carrying with acquaintances, there's a lot of baggage you're carrying with you, you know, a past interaction or something they may know about you or something, or relatives, there's a lot of baggage. With strangers, there is no baggage, and it's, people are kind of on their best behavior, and then it's thrilling. It can be thrilling, you know, but that's hard, you know. I just trying to negotiate. You talk about community building it, you know. I think it's smart to start on the small level, like just, you know, because I can dream big. You know, I have the big dreams, you know, and trying to reach those big dreams are hard challenges to get to, you know, and I'll keep dreaming those big dreams because they're beautiful. And I would like to see them happen, you know, but it's a long journey to get there. And, you know, I may not have been on the right track. It's all trial and error, you know, but there's so many other ones you have to try out, even, you know, on the street level. I've been giving a gentleman, my work has been giving, well, I work at a restaurant and we can't, of course, can't go to work right now, but they've been trying just to make sure that there's a community by providing a meal twice a week that we could pick up. But at the same time, I feel like, okay, I'm okay with food right now. I've got my unemployment check coming right now. So I've been handing it to people on the street, you know, and feeling slightly guilty about it, except that I think that they're, and so there's this one gentleman that's been super friendly that lives on the street. And then I could see him out the window. He washes cars and does like a really good job of it. But in my speed, you know, I often say, you know, I have a meal, you know, and he's always been friendly and I've given it. But today, which is why I was late, sorry, because I had to pick up meal at noon. But then, you know, finally I was like, you know, introduced myself, even though, you know, and got names and learned about. Now I've got him in my phone number for when I need to wash my car, because he does do a good job, you know, and I appreciate, now I know where he gets water, you know, all these little questions, like, and he had a big tub of hot water, and there's another business on the corner that lets him get unlimited hot water because they appreciate that he's doing a job. So these little things I think are important. This is my community. You know, he lives on my block, and I forget, you know, the big dreams of building that sometimes you've got to remember the most immediate things around you.
You know, one of the things that you brought up, I think, is one of the opportunities that we should be really aware of, is that a lot of people who don't share these various political or social ideas, and as you pointed out, a lot of times it's because they're lonely and they felt marginalized, and so they get really hard, and then they look for the other people who feel that way too, and they make community with them.
Yeah.
They don't really want to be there. These people want to be part, but they don't know how a lot of times. And at first I thought, oh, these people are just selfish and they're self-centered and stuff. But then I started asking myself, okay, well, why is that? You know, why wouldn't someone want to have more friends, and sometimes, and more people feel good about them and feel connected? And then you realize, for me, I realized a lot of times it's like they're scared. You know, they're scared of rejection. They're, you know, they don't know where they fit. They feel like if I befriend this person, all of the people who I think are my friends, the other marginalized people, they will ostracize me. You know, it's like, okay, where would I go then? So I think that presents an opportunity for us to like reach out and say, okay, yeah, we have a completely different way of looking at the world, but I still love you. You know, I can still be, if you're stuck in the snow and it's a blizzard out and your car conks out, I'm not going to leave you there because you have a different political point of view. I'm going to help you. That means I don't hate you. But if I hate you, I leave your butt there. You know?
Yeah.
And I don't hate you, so I'm going to risk my life. If I see you on the side of the road, knowing that with your Confederate flag sticker on your car, knowing that if I stop to help you, you might shoot me just because of how I look, but I'm still going to stand there and help you because I don't hate you, you know, and I do recognize that, okay, you got a problem, but I got mental problems too. So, you know, I don't figure out everything just right either. So why am I going to bang you because you couldn't figure out just that one thing, or maybe two or three things that I figured different? So I think giving people the opportunity to recognize that you do, even though you disagree with you don't hate them, and you actually are probably a better friend than those people that, you know, that they think are their friends. I think that presents some opportunities that, you know, one or two, but those count.
Well, and along that line, I'm not out to convert these people whom I find it very difficult to accept their, what they're saying and acting out. But by this point, I believe some of them are about ready to turn around a little bit. And maybe by making that phone call or saying that hello or doing some little gesture, it's like offering them a hand or a place to come off of that limb that they're out on. They've got to be looking around a little bit by now.
And I think the way to do that is not say this is the way, like from authoritative thing, but just say to be an ear, like, let them say, because I think once people say what they're thinking, if you listen with curiosity and ask a real question like, well, why are you, and let them defend it, they're going to hear it themselves coming out of their own mouth. And that's going to be more influential than you telling them.
Yeah.
So I think it's also just hearing and, even your friend that said, now you know how I feel, even by saying, well, how did you feel? How did Obama make you feel?
Mm-hmm.
And listening to them.
Yeah.
And if she has a real reason, and then asking about that, and maybe you'll hear something like, oh, I didn't get that. And then you could say, well, maybe it wasn't meant that way. Or, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
From a listening perspective, rather than a telling perspective, I think, that's hard to do.
Mm-hmm.
But, it's thrilling to be able to exercise that,
It's a little easier. Practice makes it a little easier.
Yeah.
That's called an interpersonal skill.
Yeah.
And you're good at that, LD.
Well, I'm practicing. That's what I'm trying to do. And I think it's all just a matter of practice. I'm not smarter, I'm not more empathetic or any of those things. It's just practice and curiosity. I recognize that I don't know, and I'm okay with that. I'm okay with not knowing. So it's easier to ask questions and just, okay, well, that's how that person thinks. I'm not seeing it that way, but just give them different pieces of information and see, well, okay, well, if you have this piece of information, how would you place that? And they say, well, that's not true. Well, okay, but let's just, for sake of discussion, assume that it was true. How would you place it? What would you do with that? What would you do with that information? What do you know about this thing that happened in history? And if that had happened to you or your ancestors, how would you view this different? For example, I had a kind of a discussion with some people who were upset because the guy who's head of the union in Sioux Falls was encouraging their members not to be part of this hydrochloroquine test. And the guy said, well, that's just stupid, like they should be. I said, okay, well, have you ever heard of the Tuskegee experiment? What's that? Okay, if you understood the Tuskegee experiment, you would understand why some people are not really anxious to be part of any experiment.
Yeah.
Because they don't feel like you really just saying, well, hey, look, let's see if we can help you. We'll give you the trial for this drug and that drug, since you probably, we don't know what to do with you anyway. We'll try this drug and see if it works. What they're worried about is like you just trying stuff, like swallowing a light bulb or something like that, or injecting yourself with disinfectants, just to see. Wonder what would happen if they did that. So, but if you can engage people in a conversation, and at least for me, I just say, okay, I'm gonna leave it there, and you may or may not think about it anymore, but the mind can't forget. You had that question answered. Sometime when you're sitting on the toilet and you're trying to really figure it out, it's gonna suddenly occur to you, oh, geez.
I think that is, just, yeah, just a thinking point, is important, but also talking about practice too. Another practice is just trying to get out of your own ego. you know, because it's the ego that makes you insecure, the ego that makes you think that they're thinking that when they're not thinking, you know, like all these fear of rejection, you know, those things, you know, like, you know, I know that's true of my own self. Sometimes I'm so caught up in my own head that I must look like a grouch, you know, or be like a grouch, you know, like
But a
even practicing, huh?
but a
I
cute.
must look like a walking grouch, you know, like what kind of, that doesn't do anything, you know, it doesn't foster that openness, you know.
That's a really a good point too, Allison, in the sense that if people can see you be as a model of being fearless, of being like, say, oh yeah, I didn't know that. When they can see a model for that, that can give them a road to being something different, because if they've never met anybody like that, or they can see that you feel comfortable and nothing happened to you, you didn't like go up, disintegrate or anything like that, that can give them some confidence that maybe they can say, oh, you know, I didn't think about it that way.
Yeah.
Yeah, just to give them just to have someone say, even if you don't agree with you, you know, I never thought about it that way, but you got a point, you know.
It's amazing when you're generous with somebody, how, you know, people want to do that too, you know, and that's a fun thing with strangers. I think it's easier, you know, sometimes with acquaintances, you know, the egos might be too big, like, oh, there's an ulterior motive to that or something, you know, whereas strangers kind of are just like cut off guard, like, oh, well, I want to show that I can be that way too, you know, and it's like a practice opportunity,
Yeah.
you know, like to show like I can be open-minded as well, you know, and then it's a fun exchange. Like it can be like an elevating thing, like, oh, wow, we're practicing something really fun, you know, like this is a fun activity to show that we can be generous and open, you know, it's kind of a catching disease, but it's really hard to do in baggage situations that families have or even friends have had, you know what I mean? That there's something freeing in so which speaks to those things on the streets, you know, like even practicing those things with strangers. What do you have to lose? You know, you probably aren't going to see them again. It's a good time to practice kind of being open or curious or engaging. So to remember that.
One little courageous act can give the other person courage to do that themselves. Plus it reinforces your wish to be more courageous and generous too. So that's nice.
Kevin?
No, I'm just listening to everybody. That's really, it's really good. Yeah. Yeah. I forgot what the original topic was now.
Unity.
That was the purpose of this conversation.
I know it's community, community. Yeah.
This, your background is pretty great because it looks like you're sitting outside next to a house, but the clouds haven't moved once.
Oh, they're moving.
No, they're not.
Really? I see that one that's up in the left hand.
Is it?
That one that had in the left hand corner. It was in the center a little while ago.
Oh, okay. So it really is the sky. I was starting to doubt it. I was like, I'm looking at one of these and it's not moving.
He's outdoors, I think, today.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I saw you dancing out there the other day, Kevin.
Oh, you see that video? Yeah.
Yeah, that was really great.
It's windier where I am, so the clouds are moving fast.
Yeah. Yours. Well, I can see that you're really outside.
Yeah. This is
Landscape,
nice.
that river's flowing, and
Well,
You can fool some of the people some of the time.
yeah, exactly. Well, it's been real. I want to thank you guys for participating, and
Yeah.
I hope that you'll participate again, come back again, invite other people if they want to be a part of it. Just give them my email. You all have my email, and I'll put them on the MailChimp myself. Or there's a link they can actually click on and then opt in themselves.
Okay.
So, with that, we want to thank you all, and we'll end this right here. And if you have more questions, let me know.